How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we're bringing you the recap of Season 1 as we get into the offseason here. We got one final bit of, season recapping to do. We're going to take a look at how Pitt fared specifically here in this particular season. We're going to look at the player stats, things of that nature, talk about who we're losing, and then we'll do some off-season stuff. We're going to see, coaching carousel, any big moves happening. We're going to go ahead and see what players will be losing this year before we then will see in the next video the players that we'll be bringing in for next season. We'll get closer to Season 2 getting underway. But some stuff we want to go over, so we are going to take a look at that. The first thing we're going to do, just very, very quick recap. We're going to go ahead and see, how we did this year. We'll take a look overall. We go to our team schedule here, and we can see we started out the season 33-16. Fairly comprehensive victory over Marshall. Wasn't the best, performance. Same thing with then we took on Penn State. We were both unranked at the time, but it was a great performance. We came with a 27-20 victory. We actually had 2 defensive touchdowns, which is really what gave us the victory here. It was a great performance. We then went at, I think, Florida State, who was number 4 at the time, I want to say. They finished number 17 in the country, but at the time they were number 4 away. Very tough place to play in Tallahassee. We lost 45-48 in double overtime, but it was a great performance and one that really, solidified us as a very solid contending team. We then went to Oklahoma State, beat them 45-41 on a late touchdown, Peterman to Jester Weah. Big win there. Oklahoma State ended up struggling throughout the season, but we played very well there and did just enough to come away with the win. We then had a bye and came home, took on Old Dominion, our first ever game in our throwback uniforms, and we obliterated them 55-12. Fantastic performance. Then after another bye week, we remained at home, took on Virginia Tech, and got our first conference win of the season, beating them 28-14. A good performance from our defense, who did struggle a lot throughout the season, but they really shut down Virginia Tech and did very well. Then took on Clemson, 13-1 Clemson, of course, who ended up winning the national title, but at the time they were undefeated. They were number 3 or 2 in the country, I want to say, and we took a hatchet to them, knocked them off their perch, 31-28, big victory there at home, of course, over the Clemson Tigers, and that sprung us on to great heights. We then went to Virginia, 52-38, ton of points given up against a team that only went 2-10 this season, but our offense absolutely obliterated them. We put up yardage on yardage, 52 points. Came away with a victory, and that's kind of the constant thread of this season. We always scored enough to win. Georgia Tech 41-31. We were behind at halftime, I want to say. It might have been 31-24, something of that nature, and we just shut down their option attack in the second half and came away with a win yet again. 45-40 over North Carolina. Big victory there. We just outscored them, did exactly enough that we needed to do. 52-13 obliteration of Duke, and then at Miami, 34-31, fantastic victory against the Hurricanes, who were undefeated at that time. We're their only loss for the season. And you can say that about both the national champion as well as the number 3 team in the country. We're the only team to beat those 2 teams. Of course, we then went to the ACC championship game where we took on Clemson. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the double over them. We lost 24-31. Disappointing. We had a fumble on the final drive as we were driving down the field looking to tie the game up. But it was a great effort. We really battled, and then we sprung board off of that into the Chick-fil-A Bowl, and we ended up winning 38-21 over Vanderbilt. And if you look, we played some great teams. 98-68 was our combined opponent record, one of the best in the country. So we played some very, very good opponents. There's no doubt about that. And we were, only came with 2 losses on the entire season. So very, very happy with our performance. We finished number 7 in the country. But that's, our schedule. It's a quick recap of what went on this season. Obviously, you can go back to the previous videos and see how those games played out in their entirety. But it led to us, winning our division in the ACC Coastal Division. Of course, it shows us in second now because we have 2 losses after losing in the conference championship game. But 7-1 in the conference. We had 550 points, 384 against. So we really struggled defensively, but we just put up points for absolute show. We were 7-0 at home, which was fantastic. 4-2 as the road squad. So we were unbelievable at Heinz Field, undefeated there, played really well. 4-2 on the road, nothing to shake a stick at either. Very, very good on the road, but 2 losses away from being national champions, which is pretty impressive here in our first campaign. But we had a great team, there's no doubt about it, and you'll see that when we take a look at how our team did this season. So we'll look at the season stats here for our Pitt Panthers. Of course, Nathan Peterman was our starting quarterback. Fantastic season from him. he really turned it on. The first few games of the season, we relied on that rushing attack, but Peterman turned it up when we needed him to. I think he won player of the game like 3 of our last 4 wins. So he was fantastic. Threw for over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns in 14 games. So very, very good as far as that's concerned. Only 11 interceptions, and I think after he probably had 9 of those in maybe the first 7 or 8 games. So he only threw 2 interceptions, and they were both in the Clemson ACC championship game in the final, I want to say, 4 games of the season. So fantastic from him. 25-to-11 ratio, nothing to shake a stick at. 232 yards a game, solid completion percentage. Sacked a decent amount, 32 sacks. We will want to do better on that next year. We're giving up, 2.5, 3 sacks a game. Manny Stalker, his only appearance was actually in the Florida State game. He did have a couple appearances late in mop-up duty, but in the Florida State game, he came in and actually scored a rushing touchdown to tie the game up going into halftime, which was pretty wild. So he was 3 for 5, though, the senior quarterback. Ben DiNucci, the freshman, had to play a few snaps at the end of the second quarter in the bowl game because Peterman had gone down with a minor injury. So he got a couple of snaps. So we'll see if he gets any time coming up next season. He'll be competing with the likes of Thomas McVitie. We also got a quarterback coming in who could, press for time next season. So that was our passing attack. Rushing, of course, All-American James Conner. Fantastic player. Not much more you can say about him. 17 rushing touchdowns, which might have led the country. It was definitely up there on the list. He was just a workhorse. 298 rushing attempts in 14 games. He's about 20 carries a game. 1,300 plus yards in 14 games, so almost 100 yards a game, was just absolutely killing it for us. And he's just a big bruiser. His longest run was only 25 yards, which was, not terrible, but 96 yards a game. Unbelievable player there. 448 yards after contact, which was ridiculous. I think that led the country by a long shot. 4 rushes of 20 plus, 7 broken tackles. Just a fantastic season from him. Never fumbled the ball. Our second leading rusher, incredibly enough, Quadri Henderson, 690 yards. He's a receiver. He's averaged 10.8 yards a rush as we would get him on those jet sweeps. We'd run the wide receiver option a little bit. Some jet sweeps, reverses, things of that nature. Henderson absolutely killed it. We used him very much like Pitt does in real life, throwing that motion into the offense, and with his electric speed, he killed it. 7 rushing touchdowns from the slot, basically, coming in motion, getting the ball in jet sweeps and things like that. 76 was his longest carry of the season. He averaged 50 yards a game rushing, which is fantastic for a guy that's getting, maybe 6 carries a game, 5 or 6. 8 carries of more than 20 yards, which was unbelievable. 12 broken tackles. Just a fantastic season from him. Quadri Olesen, second most running back carries on the team, behind Nathan Peterman, but keep in mind 32 sacks, so he probably only carried the ball about 100 times throughout the season, so 7 or 8 carries a game. But Quadri Olesen, 471 yards. The season before this, he was a 1,000-yard rusher for real. He's going to be our starter next year more than likely, but we have some good running backs behind him. Shantez Moss, who was a freshman, Darren Hall as well, who could, try and get in there for some playing time. But Quadri Olesen, 5 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns, 33 yards a game, was fantastic. He's a good, solid runner. Nate Peterman, he's a quarterback we're going to miss because our projected starter next year, Thomas McVitie, is not nearly as mobile as Nate Peterman. And Peterman had 383 yards rushing on the season, and that's in spite of 32 sacks. You take away those 32 sacks, where he's probably losing, 5 to 10 yards, you probably add him 200 more yards to his total, and he's probably at about 600 yards rushing. So that's the one thing you want to take into account with Peterman here. He probably had 600 yards rushing. It's just the sack yardage takes away from that, which is unfortunate that you can't really compare what he did rushing without factoring in his sacks. But he had 4 rushing touchdowns, a 67-yard run. He had 7 rushes of 20 yards or more. He was great at, either scrambling. We would run the read option a few times, so he was fantastic. Fumbled 12 times, but I don't think we actually lost that many of those fumbles. To be honest, we lost a fair few, but it's a lot of them were when he'd go out of bounds and he'd fumble as he was going out of bounds and goofy stuff like that. George Aston, our fullback, 5 touchdowns. He's a bruising back. He's a guy that he can do it all. He's like a utility knife, a Swiss Army knife, if you will. 200 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns rushing, and he's a great guy to have back there. He's just a fantastic player that can rumble forward for yards. Then we got down here, Shantez Moss, 12 carries for 60 yards. Darren Hall, only 5 carries for 23 yards. I tried to rotate, the 3rd and 4th string guys in a little bit, so they did get some carries, but we'll expect to see them more next season as we go forward. Receiving-wise, our leading receiver by a single reception was Quadri Henderson, 47 grabs in 14 games. That's only, 3.5 a game, 3.8 a game, something like that. So we didn't have any receiver that was just grabbing balls all over the place. Jester Weah averaged 3 flat. 42 and 14 is 3 flat. So Orndorff is about 3.25-ish. Henderson's maybe 3.3, something of that nature. So not a ton of catches. And that's the big thing we want to see more out of Henderson is we want him to get more yards. We know he's got speed, so he's a good slot receiver. That's usually where we would use him. But we want to see more yards after the catch, things of that nature. Only averaged 9 yards a catch, only 3 receiving touchdowns. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. So we want to see more out of Quadri in the passing game. His longest catch was only 23 yards. He's a guy that can do a lot more than that with his ability. The big guy we want to focus on, Scott Orndorff, we're losing. He's a tight end, which is really disappointing. But we did have Chris Clark, who I had in the game. I didn't play him at all because he was, basically redshirting for the Panthers this year, sitting out because he's a transfer. He'll be our starting tight end next year. He's another big body. He's similar to Orndorff in that he's a solid receiver, so we'll use him in a very similar manner. But Orndorff's going to be tough to replace. 587 yards, 4 touchdowns, was a fantastic player, a real big safety net for us. There's no doubt about that. He actually led us in yards after the catch, so fantastic player is Scott Orndorff. The big guy we're expecting huge things out of next year, Jester Weah. 42 catches, but 948 yards. He averaged 22.5 yards a reception. He's a burner. He's got great size, 6'4", great speed, 10 receiving touchdowns on the season on 42 catches, which is an unbelievable return. 81 yards per catch. He was getting deep balls. He averaged 68 yards a game. Just a fantastic season from him. So we expect big things out of him. Dantes Ford, of course, is a senior. We're going to be losing our 4th leading receiver, which is disappointing, but we do have guys that can step up, and you'll see them here in just a second. James Conner, 25 catches out of the backfield. George Aston, who will be returning, 20 catches out of the backfield. Another really good safety net. He had 3 receiving touchdowns, so he actually had 8 touchdowns from the fullback position, which is fantastic. But Aaron Matthews and Trey Tipton, Maurice French, who's fantastic. Those are the 3 guys that next year are going to be counted on to step up. Matthews, you saw, made some huge catches in the ACC championship game against Clemson. Finished the year with 12 catches, 226 yards. He's a big play guy. 6'4", big receiver, can catch the ball, has a really good spectacular catch rating. So I think we'll count on him for some big plays. Same with Trey Tipton, who made a huge play in the Clemson game as well, scoring a big touchdown to tie the game before Clemson took the lead late in the 4th quarter. But I think those 2, along with French, can be big playmakers for us next year. They'll definitely be able to replace Dantes Ford and get into some big situations for us. They'll just have to get rid of a couple of those drops. Trey Tipton, 4 drops to 7 catches, so we'll need to lessen that. But you can see Jay Marpere, senior, we're losing. But we spread the ball around to so many different players, and I want to keep that up going into next season. Of course, blocking, we're losing Adam Bisnawati, who's a fantastic blocker. We're losing Dorian Johnson, another All-American lineman. But we will have Buxer back. Alex Officer's going to be back. Brian O'Neill's going to be back. So some fantastic players there. Aaron Matthews, standout blocker. He might honestly get into the top 2 receivers, and then we'll leave Quadri Henderson in the slot. That's how good of a player that he actually is. So I'm looking forward to using them next season. But we'll definitely have to replace some players on the line, and we'll see how that goes. Defensively, Matt Galambos led us in tackles by 1. Jordan Whitehead led us in solo tackles. He'll be back next season. He's only a sophomore. He's an All-American. He won, Defensive Back of the Year, the Thorpe Award. Galambos won Defensive Player of the Year, which is unbelievable. So some great players. Unfortunately, we're going to lose Terrence Webb, senior safety, but we have some fantastic players coming in. You'll see that in the next episode, as well as some good up and young comers that hopefully will do well for us. For as many tackles as Webb made and as decent as he was, I think we can definitely get some improvements there. We then had Avonte Maddox and Ryan Lewis. You see our corners had a ton of tackles. Reason being, we gave up a lot of passing yards. So we're going to try and remedy that next season. Unfortunately, of course, we're going to be losing Juan Price. We'll go through some of the seniors. We're going to lose Juan Price. Fantastic rush end, All-American player, won the Defensive Lineman of the Year, the Rotary Award, I think that is. So tough to lose him, or Lombardi, one of the 2. I can't remember which it is. But we're going to lose Mike Caprera, unfortunately. We're going to lose Ryan Lewis, who was horrible for us, I'll say, as a corner. But, senior leadership, all of that. But DeMar Hamlin, Dane Jackson, I think they'll more than likely be able to slot into those roles. And we expect Rory Blair to keep up 12 sacks led the team. You'll see we'll go through Reggie Mitchell, another senior we're losing. Elijah Zeitz, will expect some more out of him this year. Tyreek Jarrett, a senior nose tackle that we're losing, who was an absolute monster, so we'll look to fill his shoes. Shakir Soto, our other defensive tackle, we're losing, so we're going to completely have to replace our defensive line entirely. We got one starter of our 4 defensive linemen returning, and that is Rory Blair. So, we'll see how that turns out. Bam Bradley, another senior linebacker we're losing. So we're going to have a lot of new defensive starters coming into next season. There's no doubt about that. We'll need to see big things out of them. Like I said, solo tackles were led by Whitehead, Galambos, Webb, all seniors there that we're losing. Of course, tackles for loss were led by Galambos, Rory Blair, who had 21, so we expect another big season out of him. Caprera, another senior we're losing. Juan Price, a senior we're losing. Jarrett, a senior we're losing. So a ton of players we're going to lose there. But sacks, we led the nation in sacks. Rory Blair, of course, led the country, I believe, with 12 sacks. So tough loss there. Or he'll be back, excuse me. But Galambos, Price, Caprera, Jarrett, our next 4 sackers will all be leaving. So we'll need to replace that production. We'll see if Jeremiah Taleni will be able to live up to some hype and be able to do that. Our leading in interceptions, Avonte Max, had 7. He'll be back next season, so we look to see some continued improvement out of him. But we're losing Galambos, we're losing Terrence Webb, we're losing Reggie Mitchell, we're losing Ryan Lewis, and Caprera. So we need to see some growth out of those guys. And of course, defensive touchdown, pass deflections, all our corners, of course, you're going to see high levels there. Forced fumbles, we were led by Whitehead and Hamlin, who are fantastic. Whitehead, I mean, what more can you say about him? Fantastic player. He's from Pittsburgh. Obviously, like I said, I created the team, so where they're from doesn't exactly match up. But fantastic player. DeMar Hamlin, another Pittsburgh boy. Unbelievable player. So we'll look to see more out of them. Our touchdowns on the season, you can see safety, Caprera had 1. And touchdowns, Terrence Webb, Tyreek Jarrett, Avonte Max, Juan Price all had touchdowns on the season. Another player we're going to have to replace, kicking, Chris Blewett, our senior kicker, 21 field goals for 24 attempts. A very reliable kicker. We didn't put him in a lot of long field goal situations. I think that was due mainly to the sliders that I had. Just for some reason, I should have adjusted the kicking power a little bit, because he had a solid power leg and he just couldn't hit anything of 50 plus. It just wouldn't go long enough, so I might have to adjust the sliders there. But he was a good player. I might look to changing my house rules for how I kick field goals. I saw one that was like close your eyes when you go to kick a field goal, to make it a little harder on yourself. So I might do that next year, especially with a freshman kicker. I'll make it a little bit more interesting. So we might try something like that. He was perfect on extra points, just a great kicker. Ton of touchbacks as well on kickoffs. He had 60% ratio as far as touchbacks on kickoffs. So great player. We're going to have a tough time replacing. Ryan Winslow, our punter, will be back. So we'll, good to keep a solid player like him. Quadri Henderson, kick returning. 2,000 yards kick return, 4 touchdowns, 104-yard kick return. He was unreal. We'll hope to see more of the same from him next year, as he'll be back there yet again. He was returner of the season, All-American returner, All-ACC first-team returner. So we want to see more from him there. And punt returning, again, he was solid, 14 yards per punt return, along a 36. Didn't get one to the house, but hopefully we'll see that next season. So that was overall look at the team. We'll go ahead and just quick do a national rundown so you can see who kind of led the country in some different stats. We won't spend a ton of time on it just because I don't want to make this a super long video. But you can see quarterback ranked JT Barrett was number 1. He won the Heisman, so you can obviously understand why. I believe Peterman's pretty high, 143.4. Very, very high. The only people in our conference higher than him, I think, were Deshaun Watson and Brad Kaya, who didn't play most of the season. So Peterman was fantastic for us yardage-wise. He's like 7th in the country. That's mainly due to the way the stats are generated on the game. They don't generate as much passing stats as they should, like happens in real life. But Peterman had a fantastic season. Only 25 touchdowns. That's where you can see he drops down. I think the leader was Barrett with 40, which is absurd. Most interceptions was Stanton from UNLV, 20 yards per game. Falk from Washington State was the only guy over 300, which shows you why it's not super realistic, of course. But Peterman had a great season. 32 sacks, which was a lot. You can see it's pretty high up on the list in the country, so we'll want to get that down next year, especially with a young quarterback in there. Rushing yards led by Jake Owens of Air Force. They're an option attack, so you can see why. If we count down 1, 2, there's Christian McCaffrey there, Leonard Fournette, Bo Scarborough of Bama, Elijah Hood of UNC, some very good players. And James Conner's going to be up here somewhere. There he is, maybe 20th in the country in rushing yards. Fantastic season from him. Touchdowns, he is number 1, which is unbelievable. Great season from Jimmy Conner. Yards per game, you can see Xavier Johnson of South Alabama actually led the country. Then Owens and Hilleman of BC. Conner's down there somewhere, but a very good season from James. Yards after Conner, like I said, he's way ahead of everybody else. 20 or more yards rushes. Quadri Henderson actually had the most in the country, followed by Nate Pearson, which is wild. Broken tackles, Elijah Hood, blah, blah, blah. Receiving, Gabe Marks, All-American. He might have won. I don't think he won the Blitnikoff. I think the Blitnikoff went to somebody lower. I want to say guy from A&M. Yeah, Josh Reynolds, 70 catches. He had 15 touchdowns, which definitely helped him out. But you'd expect somebody like Ishmael Adams could have won it. He's All-American. I mean, Gabe Marks should have won it. He got robbed if he didn't win it, to be honest. Obviously, our leading receiver only had 47 catches, so pretty far down the list. Average yards per catch, though, Jester, we have first in the country. 10 touchdowns is also very high on the list. Longest catch of the season, we were 5th. Jester, we had 81 yards. So good season from him, no doubt about it. Most drops in the country. Let's see who was a drop. Tyrone Taylor. Blocking, we're not going to worry about it too much. Defensively, most tackles was Marquise Roberts from Kansas, 117 tackles. TJ McCollum of Western Kentucky. Some very good players there. Our leading tackle was Galambos with 96, Whitehead 95. So great seasons from them. Obviously, solo tackles a bit rigged. We're way up top of the list there. Tackles for loss, though. Our leading tackle for loss is Galambos, pretty high on the list there. Rory Blair's also going to be up there fairly high. I think he had 21, somewhere in that nature. Yeah, there he is with Caprera. Sacks, like I said, Rory Blair did lead the country, which is a fantastic year from him. Avonte Max tied for 3rd in the country in interceptions, so hopefully we want to see his coverage go up, coverage skills go up, but he was fantastic as far as, making the picks at least. So good as far as that's concerned. We'll go to kicking here. Most field goals in the country was Gantz from Cincinnati. Good season from him. Best field goal percentage, Chris Blewett. That's where we can see him. He's about 7th in the country in field goal percentage. Great year from him. 67 extra points made, which was 2nd in the country to Ohio State's kicker. So very good season from him. Quickly go through here. Punting yardage. Not too fussed about it, but you can look at it if you want. Kick return, obviously, Quadri Henderson. Easily with the most yards. I'll probably take less kick returns with him just to make it a little more fair, because you see he had the most kick returns by 15, so I'll probably just take a few more in the end zone to make it a little bit more fair. But he did have 4 touchdowns, which easily led the country. You can see Jabril Peppers down there. Punt returning, he didn't lead in yards there, but I also didn't take that many punt returns. He did lead in the average, though, which is fantastic. So that's a little look around the country at kind of the best players as far as that's concerned. So you can see we talked about who's going to leave, the players that played well for us. So now we're going to get into the off season and see, if we lose any coaches. I don't know. We had such a good offensive season. We might lose our OC. I don't know what players are going to leave. And then we'll kind of end it with leading into the recruiting class, so you can see who's coming into the team next season, because we'll have something special planned for that. So hang on tight as we kind of get into the offseason a little bit here. We'll give you a little tease of the guys that are leaving. That's kind of the way we'll wrap up this video. We'll say thank you to the seniors before the next video. We'll have the new recruits in it, because we'll have something special for you with that. So let's take a look here as we go. So before we get to the guys leaving, I figure we'll give you a little taste of the coaching carousel. We'll just look at maybe the first 5 or 6 jobs that'll go off the board. You can see Auburn struggled last year, so they're the most high-profile job. Gus Malzahn got fired, so they're going to look to get a new head coach after going 6-7 last year. Let's see who they'll bring in. And they get Navy's head coach, Ken Niumatalo, which is wild because he runs an option attack. That'll be pretty interesting, seeing if Auburn goes to an option. My word. Stanford, David Shaw, contract expired. They extended him. Very good coach, so, I mean, that's probably in their best interest. Sonny Dykes fired at Cal after they went 5-7 last year, and they get Clemson's DC Brent Venables. Ooh, big coup, getting a fantastic defensive coordinator from the national champions. Baylor, Jim Grobe's contract expired. They decided to extend him. Arkansas, Brett Bielema left. So we'll see who they go ahead and bring in potentially. They're kind of looking around. Tom Herman maybe. Tony Elliott from Clemson, Tuberville. They get Tommy Tuberville from Cincy, who went 12-2 last year, so that's a big signing for them. Or 11-3, excuse me. So he's had a good year. BYU decides to retain their coach. Iowa here. Kirk Ferentz was fired after going 4-8 last year. Let's see who they bring in. And they go Mike Stoops from Oklahoma, so big signing there, getting a coach at the DC of Oklahoma, went 12-1, going to get that head coach job. So that's where we'll leave it. We'll go through the rest of the coaching carousel, but that's what we'll kind of give you guys. We'll tell you if anything happens with our program. All right, so if we look at ourselves, we can see John Matthews, our defensive coordinator, struggled last year. Obviously, his job security is low because our D was not great last year. Did enough to win, but he gets extended. And our OC, Ben Keller, who was unbelievable last year. I can't believe nobody tried to scoop him up, but he got extended as well. So that is fantastic that we'll be retaining those guys. And now here's the big moment of truth. What guys will be leaving us going into next season? And, I'm shocked. George Asta and Brian O'Neill wanted to leave. I wanted them to stay on. You know, they're staying on in real life. You know, realism for the win. But the one player that did not choose to leave, I'm shocked. Our highest overall player, which was James Conner. He did not choose to declare for the draft. Now, in the interest of the career, in the interest of the dynasty, in the interest of storylines, in the interest of keeping it fun, keeping it challenging, he went to the draft in real life. We're going to make him go to the draft. We're going to obviously do that by when we get to the ability to cut players section. Unfortunately, he's going to be cut. We're not really going to cut anybody else, but he's going to get cut off of the roster just because of the fact that I want to, keep that realism, make it challenging, get a little bit of roster turnover, things like that. Obviously, you can leave in the comments if you don't want me to do that, but that's going to be the real plan, okay? So you can see those two guys are staying, so we can kind of scroll down here real quick and ignore them. But leaving, we got Adam Bisnawadi, of course, left tackle. He's projected to go in the first round of the draft. Unbelievable alignments. That's fantastic. Nathan Peterman, our quarterback. He's also a senior. These are all seniors that are leaving. The only underclassman that's going to leave is going to be Connor. Peterman, of course, is leaving. He's projected to go in the draft. Dorian Johnson also projected to get drafted. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Orndorff or Juan Price get drafted as well. But I know size plays an issue in whether they get projected to get drafted. They should get drafted in real life, but we'll see what happens here. Dantes Ford, though, thank you for playing with us, sir. Great player. Same with Scott Orndorff. Of course, defensively, we're losing Juan Price. Fantastic lineman. Unbelievable. Mike Caprera. Bam Bradley. We're going to lose Galambos as well. We'll see him as we get further down. Ryan Lewis, cornerback. Shakir Soda, defensive tackle. Tyreek Jarrett, defensive tackle. Our backup fullback, who is actually the long snapper in real life. Pat Quirin. Chris Blue, of course, our kicker. We're going to lose him. John Guy, backup lineman. Matt Galambos. Manny Stalker, who was our backup quarterback this year. Tarish Webb. Reggie Mitchell. A lot of defensive players you can see. Jamar Parrish, our second string tight end. So all of these guys, we want to just thank them for their career with the Panthers. We've appreciated all they've done for us, what they did in the career this year. So obviously, thank you guys so much for everything. Wish you all the best in the future. We'll see who actually gets drafted. That'll be kind of where we'll end it with that little teaser. Will be who's going to get drafted. I know that's kind of the isn't that the next thing up? Is who gets drafted before we go. We get transfer requests. And so the draft results, you can see Bisnawadi went in the first round, Peterman in the 6th, Dorian Johnson in the 7th, and Galambos went in the 7th, which was fantastic. What we'll also see is, let's take a look. Did anybody else here good get drafted? As far as, let's see if did Myles Garrett go to the draft? He did not, so he'll be here next year. You see Trevor Knight went 7th. Can we just do all teams and see who was what round draft picks? No, we can't do all teams, so we'll just do the big teams. Bama, they lost a ton of people. Where is, I can't believe, so Robinson didn't leave, the lineman. So they kept him somehow. We'll go to Clemson. Let's see, I assume Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson didn't even go to the draft. Unless he didn't get drafted, but I don't see that happening. So Deshaun Watson wants another national title. He wants that Heisman, maybe? That's pretty wild that he didn't leave. What is it with the game? And a lot of guys not leaving. Dalvin Cook, nope, he's still at Florida State, so they're still going to have their big running back. Let's see if any other big teams. Did Brad Kaya go from Miami? Nope. Brad Kaya is going to be back. Grant, he was injured for most of the season, so he'll probably want to come back. How about Mitchell Trubisky? Surely he went to the draft. He did. He actually did leave early, so Trubisky went and got drafted. Switzer's gone, so that's good for us that they're losing a couple of big guys. How about Deshaun Kaiser? No, he's returning for Notre Dame. JT Barrett, did he go? JT Barrett, the Heisman winner. Guy won a Heisman last year. He didn't even leave. Unbelievable. Baker Mayfield was a senior. He had to go. So the fact a lot of these guys stayed is wild. Chad Kelly got drafted. Anybody from Penn State go? Marcus Allen, Brandon Bell, Sickles, Wortman White. So they kept a couple of their offensive players that left in real life. So a lot of players that could have left did not. So that's pretty wild. So we'll see how that kind of affects things as they play out this season. But that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to go to the recruiting here in the next episode. That's going to be one that you're definitely going to want to tune in for, because we got something special for those of you that have been following along with the Dynasty. Even if you haven't been following along and you want to get involved in this Dynasty, we're going to have something big for you guys coming up in the next episode. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. Thank you so much for tuning in to all Season 1. I'm pretty excited to get Season 2 underway for you guys. So as always, hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.